Hello, this is Kyle, also known as Alientude, reviewing today 3 different blades by Fidestisan. Now, a couple things you should know up front. First off, I apologize for my voice. I am getting over a cold, so my throat is still a little bit sore and I am hoarse. Another thing you should know is that these are review samples. All 3 of these swords were sent to me by Fidestisan for the purposes of this review. I did not pay for them. If you think that makes me biased, at least you know ahead of time. These are all available on Amazon, and they don't really have product names so much as they have Amazon SEO optimized descriptions. So the Katana is called the Mount Fuji style 2.21 pound 40-inch samurai real katana sword, Japanese 1065 spring steel blade, artificial hamon full tang stainless tsuba, and it retails for $99. The Tanto is the handmade Royal Japanese chrysanthemum blade Tanto short katana samurai real 13-inch 1065 spring steel blade steel full tang traditional system copper koshi katana. It sells for $108. And the arming sword is the 36-inch handmade medieval knight real Viking arming sword, riveted single-handed full tang hand and a half with black scabbard / sheath. And it sells for $165. And then the katana is the black option, the Tanto is the blue option, and the arming sword is the classic guard option. Those are a mouthful of words to describe these swords, and they're not very accurate either, especially the arming sword. But I assume that's just the way things have to be named on Amazon to get any kind of search results, because if you look at the vast majority of products, they have this kind of just word salad approach, and it's a real shame, honestly. But anyways, what I'm going to do for this review is, since there's 3 different swords, I'm going to go through them one by one and give you an overview of the sword, what I think of it, what I think could be improved, if I think it's worth the money, what I thought of using it when doing backyard cutting, that kind of thing. So one section for each of them. And if you're interested in one in particular, if you look at the chapters on the video, I will have it broken down so you can skip right to the one you're interested in. So let's start with the Katana. Now this sells, like I said, for $99, and it is a functional sword. At that price, you have to expect there's going to be a lot of compromises to the construction methods, to the materials, and the overall fit and finish to get it to such a low price. Now, as far as I can tell, this is properly constructed, but there are some caveats there. Let's first look at the saya, though. It's got this fairly glossy black lacquer on it, and then this hand-carved, well, I say hand-carved, I'm assuming that's the case. It might also be done by a machine. I don't know, but it is actually cut into the wood of the saya. It's this decoration here. It kind of looks like a snake or maybe dragon theme. I don't really know what it's supposed to represent, but it does give a little bit of visual flair to the saya. And it's got this very shoestring feeling sageo on it that matches the color of the ito. And then looking at the individual components of the saya, the koiguchi, it is wood all the way out to the end. I don't see any other material there. It looks like it's just wood. And the kurigata is either wood or some kind of plastic. And then I don't think there is actually anything, actual kojiri as a separate piece. It's probably just another piece of wood or maybe plastic as well. The overall shape of it is relatively slender. It doesn't have any taper in any dimension, but it's decent. And the shaping of the koiguchi is better than I would expect at this price point. It's finished pretty decently. There's not a lot of loose wood or shavings or anything like that, which is not uncommon in katana at this price point. And then if we look at how the blade fits in it, it slides in pretty nicely. Doesn't take much effort to push it out with my thumb, but it doesn't come out. There's quite a bit of rattle in it to be expected at this price point. But overall, it's a pretty functional saya for $99. Let's take a look at the hilt of the katana. We have the kashira, the fuchi, and the suba are all finished very brightly. The description of the sword says that the suba is stainless steel, and the other two pieces look like they're the same material. I have a magnet here. Let's test it. So the kashira does react to the magnet, as does the suba and the fuchi. So they are ferrous. They are not made of some really cheap alloy. That's impressive at this price point. Usually at these super budget katana, you will get some really cheap alloy that will deform very easily and has a terrible time being functional. The fact that these are ferrous, iron-based, apparently stainless steel, that's quite nice at this price point. The overall look is, like I said, it's a little bit bright for my taste, but some people do like that. I prefer it to be brought back a little bit, so it's not quite so eye-catching. The Menuki are said to be brass in the sword's description, so I don't really have any reason to question that, especially since it seems like the other components are stainless steel. It seems like that's accurate. The overall details on the fuchi and kashira, these are two very simple designs, which is a very good choice at a budget of $100. When you try to go too flashy, too much design at a very low cost, the casting, the molds that you use for the casting usually are old and worn out, so you get very muddy details. Going with very simple designs really helps hide that problem. And the fuchi and kashira look nice enough. I like the designs. They're very generic ones. You'll see these on pretty much any Chinese-made katana. You can see that maker will have these fittings available. But I think they look good enough on this. The suba kind of loses that a little bit. It has a dragon theme to it, and it looks good from afar, but when you get close, you can definitely see that the mold has been used a lot because there's not clear definitions between the different heights of everything, and the details all kind of blur together. You can still see what they're going for, but it's definitely lower quality, and it's one of the reasons I think this kind of suba is not the best for a very low priced katana. I would prefer something just a flat disc. You don't really need a whole lot of detail at this price point. The fit of the fittings is good so far. I haven't had any kind of looseness in the suba, the fuchi, or the kashira. There is one very prominent ledge on the kashira here, but it's not sharp. If I rub my finger along this, it's not, there's been a little bit of care taken to smooth out the corners, chamfer them over, whatever you want to call it. So it actually fits and it doesn't hurt the hand if you rub up against that or impact target with that part in your hand. No problems there at all. And now I have to talk about some bad parts, and that is the actual tsuka and the ito. They're not good. The actual wood core is too big. This is a very bulky grip, and I don't feel like I have a good grip on it. And that is exacerbated by the very loose ito. The knots do not alternate on here, which they should. Even at a very low cost, you should do the ito wrapping. That's one of the most important things you should try to focus on in a low-cost katana, because it's how you interact with the sword. If the ito is loose, like this is very loose, I don't have a good grip on the sword, and I don't have good confidence that I'm going to keep my grip on it. And then you have to really hold on tighter than is necessary, and that kind of wears you out. It causes me to tense up when I'm swinging. It's not good. This really does need, even at this price point, this is not acceptable. This is too loose of ito, in my opinion. The Samaigawa underneath is real, from what I can tell. It looks like real. It's panels. They do not inlay in the wood. Wouldn't really expect them to inlay at this price point, but it would be nice. But they're also very narrow. You can very easily see the wood of the actual tsuka core in a few spots, and it's functional. The Samaigawa was fine. It could be better, but at this price point, it's not a problem. But the ito material itself feels fine, but the actual wrapping it's something that really needs to be improved, especially because the more you use this, the looser it's going to get. And rewrapping this would cost, if you had somebody professional do it, would cost 3 to 4 to 5 times how much this sword costs. Obviously, that's not viable. It's just something that needs to be done properly from the maker, because it really does need at least an acceptable level of tightness, and this falls down in that regard. Moving on to the blade, one of the first things I can say about it is it has a ton of profile taper for a katana. If you look at it, it gets pretty narrow here out towards the tip, which is not what I'm used to seeing in a katana, but it does make for this to be a very light sword. The listing of it said it's 2.2 pounds, so that's quite light for a katana. It also says it's 1065 steel. I have no reason to question that. It's got a very prominent fake hamon, which is ground on. And I typically don't like ground hamons because sure, they look decent from afar, but the moment you get close, you see the grind lines and it just doesn't look right. I generally prefer for through hardened katana to have just a straight steel finish. Don't bother with a fake hamon. If you're going to do a fake hamon, I usually prefer a Saguha style, which is just like the straight line. But I will say that this is not bad. It's not great, but I do like that they did the Mount Fuji style, where you have these waves here and then you have this one big one that represents Mount Fuji. It's a cool look. It's not one I've really seen that often in fake hamons. You don't see it that often on real hamons either, but it's a cool look. It still isn't to my taste, though, especially when I get close. I just don't like the way that looks. Something else that's kind of interesting is it does not have a yokote. There's absolutely no transition into the kasaki. It's just a smooth one. At this price point, you would never expect a geometric kasaki, so this kind of just does away with it entirely. If we look at the surfaces of the blade, there's some very, very minor rippling, but not a whole lot. And they're very, very shallow, so it's not a concern at all. The finish overall is a mirror that's a little bit dull, which is a good choice. If you go too shiny, it gets disrupted by any kind of cutting you'll do. Will put scratches in the finish, and then getting that back to a mirror is near impossible without a ton of work. So I think not going for full mirror is a good call there. And you can see that it is quite sharp. Went through that with no problem at all. It is a nicely sharpened katana, and that brings me to how it is to cut with it. And you can see during this cutting footage, it cuts quite well, especially on the big milk jug that I tested it on. I was surprised I got multiple cuts on my half-destroyed stand that I really need to replace. It managed to get me multiple cuts without knocking the milk jug off. That surprised me. That says that this has a good edge on it. It's fun to move around, but that loose Ito really means I have to pay very close attention to my grip and really squeeze a little bit harder than I want to make sure it's a secure grip in my hands, rather than having a little bit more natural of a grip, being able to, flick it out there with powering it with my back fingers, whereas I have to kind of like grip it and do more of wrist cuts and put more of the shoulder into it, that kind of thing. I can't really power it like that because I don't feel like I have a strong enough grip on it without really squeezing tightly. And that's why it's such a problem that the Ito is that loose. So the Tanto is next, and I'll say when I first unboxed these 3 swords, this was the one that really made me go, ooh, I like the look of that. The blue is gorgeous. Blue is my favorite color. I really like this royal blue lacquer they've got here. And the leather Ito does a pretty good job of matching that, although not exact. I will say it's a little bit odd to have 3 different shades of blue here when you've got the lacquer, you've got the leather Ito, and then you've got the probably cotton Sageo here. It is a little bit jarring to see those 3 different shades of blue, but it still does work, and it pairs really nicely with these brass bits on here. The saya fit is a little bit tight. I have to yank it to get it out, but I can do it consistently. So it's not getting stuck in there. And that's the most important thing. There's a chrysanthemum right in there that does kind of like, it goes from I guess you would call this a fuchi. I'm going to kind of mess up the terms here because I'm really not as familiar with Tanto. But the fuchi and then the koiguchi, I guess, they share that chrysanthemum. And then when you take it out, you can see that it's on both of them. Half of the design's on both of them. They are probably, I was going to say actually they are probably the same piece, but they are actually looking at them, they are absolutely not, because there's a small ledge here on this one, and then this one has the indent for that ledge to go into. I'm going to put the saya down here for a sec. The Ito on here, it's leather, and it's a little bit looser than I would like it to be, but it's acceptably tight, as opposed to the Katana, which is unacceptably loose. This is decent enough to be functional. I don't feel like I have a problem gripping it. I still think it's a little bit bulky. If I wrap my fingers around it, my hand, it just feels, I feel it in my hand a little bit more than I would like. It could be slimmed down by a tiny bit. Part of that is also the Samigawa on here is, I can tell that it's not inlaid in the wood because there's a very distinct line in the Ito where the Samigawa ends. And I think if the Samigawa was inlaid into the wood, it would feel better. As it is, I can feel that line in my hand, and it's just giving me a little bit of pause when I hold it and like, oh, I feel that there. I don't want to feel that specific line. I want it to feel more, to fit into my hand just that tiny bit better. At $108, this is not a big criticism. It's just a minor criticism that I think something that could be improved a little bit. There's no hot spots in the transitions. There's a little bit of a ledge here, and it's a little bit sharper than the ledge on the Katana, but it's smaller than the ledge, and it doesn't bother me at all. It also fits so that my fingers don't really need to move around. I don't really interact with that spot at all. The blade itself, I think, is really gorgeous, actually. It's very simple. It's got very little geometry to it, frankly. It does have some distal taper, as does the Katana, but it doesn't have like the shinogi G, the ridge line, anything like that. It's a basic wedge, which is Hirazukuri, if I'm remembering correctly. Do not quote me on that, because I could be wrong. And then it also has this horimono cut into the blade, and it's actually quite nice. It's got a dragon theme to it, and then I don't know what the symbol is that the dragon is coiling around, but it's nicer looking and more detailed than I would expect at $100, $108. It's quite well done, and it's actually better well done than the Suba is, so that's pretty damn nice. The edge is also pretty sharp. I was kind of struggling to get the paper straight there, but it slices through the paper no problem at all. And cutting with it, now, I don't cut with knives pretty much at all. I am very much a sword guy. So I didn't do a lot with this, but I did a little bit of stabbing on water balls, a little bit of cutting, and it cuts very well, it cuts very nicely, and it stabs very well. It's fun to use, and I like this Tanto. In fact, I could easily see this being a EDC knife if you wanted it to be. I think it's nice and compact, it's very attractive, it's very effective, and I think it's just got a lot of class to it. And now we're going to talk about the arming sword here, which retails for $165. This one, to me, looks like it's inspired by the one that the Kingmaker from Albion is inspired by, this sword on screen here. This looks like it's inspired by that, especially in the hilt, although the blade's a little bit different. Let's take a look at the hilt. The hilt furniture, the pommel and the crossguard, have a very distinct cast look to them that I think makes it look cheaper than it should. That said, I understand why, because finishing this kind of stuff up does take extra effort when you're trying to keep the costs low. Going for a rougher finish is one of the ways to keep the costs low. The important thing is that there's absolutely no hot spots anywhere on the hilt furniture. It's very functional. It looks very modern because of that cast look and cast finish to it. It's also kind of weird because this should be in my opinion, should be a peen block, and it's just one piece with the pommel rather than a separate piece being a peen block. That said, it is peened through. It's got a pretty robust peen, and it looks decent enough. It just looks modern as well. The big problem with the hilt is the grip, and that's going to have some of the same problems as the katana. This grip is too big. If you look at this width here, it needs to be shaved down some. It is too big in my hand. I do not have a good grip on it, and let me demonstrate. So if I hold it in my hand like this, I can twist it very easily because I just can't get a great grip on it because it's too wide here. It doesn't fit my hand the way I want it to. A real quick note here. When I'm showing the comparisons to the Albion Kingmaker, this is not in any way a comparison of value or price or quality or anything like that. I'm showing you what I consider to be a similar hilt with better proportions. That said, there are things I dislike about the Kingmaker's grip. The leather, I don't think it's actual leather, it's some kind of imitation leather on here, is not helping the grip either. It's got a unpleasant feel to it compared to real leather. And then aside from it being too wide of a grip, it comes to too much of a point here. It's not actually like a point, but when I grip it like this, I can feel it pushing into this part of my hand right here in a slightly uncomfortable way. Again, we're not talking about like hot spots, but it's slightly uncomfortable and it lessens my grip on the sword. And then the cord texture underneath it, and then these risers are very soft, not particularly well done. And this is just has all the hallmarks of being made by makers who don't really understand European sword grips because they just don't quite fit in the hand. They don't quite work as well as they could if they understood how to make it. And it's just, it is what it is, unfortunately, but it's something that could really be used to be improved. There's also a seam in the very middle of the grip. Normally when you would have a seam with stitches like this, you normally see them put on the edge of the grip. Here it's in the middle. It doesn't bother me. Either way I'm holding it, it's not a sharp seam. The stitching is not rough or anything like that, so it doesn't actually bother me at all when I'm gripping it and impacting targets and cutting targets with it. It doesn't seem to actually cause any issues, so that's good. The fit of the blade to the crossguard is kind of odd, honestly. It's not really shaped to match the blade, and you can also see quite a bit of epoxy or glue or something like that in there. But it's fine. At $165, you don't expect great fit and finish in there. And that's the kind of thing that I am perfectly fine seeing a not particularly tight grip there. Just like I don't really mind the finish on the hilt furniture. At this price point, that's a kind of compromise I can really get behind. The grip functionality is something that I think is where they need to put some more effort into it. But moving on to the blade, this is, I would say, most representative of a Type 16 blade with a fuller that goes, it's about, what, 2/3 of the blade, way up the blade, and then a diamond cross section afterwards. The fuller might be a tiny bit long for a Type 16, but it's not aggressively bad. And the tip is nicely acute. Overall, what's really interesting about this blade is that it is light. It weighs less than 2 pounds. And when I first picked it up out of the box, I was like, whoa, that is a quick sword and a fast and light and nimble sword. I'll get to that in just a minute when I talk about cutting with it. I look at the surfaces of the blade, There's very minor rippling in it, but it's like the Katana, very, very shallow. And I mean, you can really only notice it when you look very closely. The finish is also, it's basically a satin, and it's actually quite evenly done, impressively done for this price point. The fuller has a little bit of wobble in a few spots, but not a lot. It's mostly straight. And let's see, finishes actually remarkably similar place on both sides, so that's well done. The tip is ever so slightly asymmetrical. The center ridge doesn't go quite up into the center, and one edge has a very slight difference in the curve to it, but very, very minor. Overall, the finish and the shaping of the blade is remarkably well done. And let's see how sharp it is as well. Very, very sharp, which is really nice to see, because a lot of when Chinese makers make European style swords, they will oftentimes put lousy edges on them. This is not a lousy edge. So cutting with it, it was a little bit challenging for me to get good cuts. I didn't get bad cuts, and there were some that were pretty good, but I was able to get some, but at the same time, my targeting was a little off. I was hitting a little high on the bottles in general, and that usually leads to less good cuts. But it is fast. It moves quickly. It has a ton of sword wind. I'm sure you can hear that, because I can hear it incredibly well. There's a lot of sword wind in this, which is, to me, kind of surprising with such a short blade. It's not particularly easy with a short blade to get the tip really whipping through the air, but this does it. You can see it's balanced pretty close to the guard. That looks like about 2.5 to 3 inches. I did a Unterhau on one big, I think it was a Cascade bottle, something like that. I overswung on this, but it cut through that with no problem. And that was a fairly tough plastic. It's thick plastic. It's not particularly tough plastic, but it's relatively thick, and getting a good cut on that kind of a bottle with a relatively small sword, it's not particularly easy in my experience, and this one did very, very well on it. So it is fast, and it moves around very well. My complaint about the grip, though, I think that's part of why my accuracy wasn't great, is because this grip just doesn't fit my hand the way I want it to. This sword would benefit so much from a new grip, and honestly, I think I am tempted to have this modified to deconstruct it, shorten the grip, put a new wood core, a new grip wrap on there. I think you'd have a hell of a sword if you did that. If that's the kind of thing you're interested in doing, if you have that skill set, this is a really good base, in my opinion, for modification. All right, so let's go through each of these and talk about whether I think they are worth the price. The Katana is $99, and it's a maybe. I am really hesitant to recommend it because the Ito wrap is just not tight enough, in my opinion, for a functional sword. It needs a better Ito wrap to be what I consider something safe to recommend. At this, even at this price point, I don't think it provides a secure enough grip to be safe to really use very much at all. If the Ito wrap were tightened up a little bit, just brought to an acceptable level. It doesn't need to be super tight. It doesn't need Hishigami, especially if you're trying to keep this very low price point. But it needs to be tight enough to give me a secure grip. If it did that, if they were able to bring it up to that, then yes, I do think this would be worth the $100. Even if there's things about it that don't match my aesthetic taste and sense of what I want out of a sword, I think this would be a very nice entry point with a better Ito wrap. So I can't say yes to the Katana. The Tanto, yes, $108. It's a really cool little blade. It has more detail in the Horimono than I expected. And incidentally, there's a couple different Tanto blades that they have with this general design with different horimono. Matthew Jensen featured one on his channel that had a more elaborate horimono that looked at least as good as mine, if not better. So I think the Tantos are these Tantos are a really cool option at not a high price. So yes, I think the Tanto's worth it. The arming sword is kind of in the middle of those two. I think there is a gem hidden in this sword, but it needs work. The grip needs to be replaced. If you just bought this right out of the box, if it fits your hand, great. But for me, it doesn't fit my hand at all. And I really think the grip just needs to be slimmed down a little bit. It's too wide in this dimension, and it just doesn't fit the hand very well. Again, this is my experience, my hands. So if it fits your hands, great. And I think if it does, then you've got a banger of a sword for $165. But even at that price, even with this grip being not great for me, I still think it's worth it. I like this sword. I love the handling of the sword. It comes with a scabbard. I completely forgot to show you the scabbard, so let me do that real quick. So here's the scabbard that I completely forgot to show you. I'm not going to put the sword in because it doesn't actually fit the scabbard very well. My climate, I've said this so many times, especially with Chinese-made scabbards. For whatever reason, the difference in climate between where they're made and where I live, it causes the scabbards to seize up badly on almost all of the swords I get from China. So it doesn't fit all the way. It's close, but doesn't fit all the way. It's a fine scabbard. It's a little bulky. It's the leather on it, and especially the leather of the belt feels a little bit cheap, but it's fine for what it is. And it is wood core. And at $165, you really can't ask for more than that. So going back to my value judgment, if you will, of the arming sword, I think it is worth it at the $165, even with the grip that I am not a fan of. I think at that price point, there's not really many competitors for arming swords. And this one is well sharpened, fun to move around, and is a good cutter. So if you can deal with that grip, if the grip works for you, or if you want to take the sword and customize it, it is a very good deal at that price point. So the arming sword, I say yes. The Tanto, I say yes. The Katana, I say not quite, but it's not far off. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? And that's going to wrap up this review. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Fidestisan for sending me these blades. Until next time, Alien Tude out.